Well, good morning. Today is Monday, July the 10th. The time is 10 o'clock. The Board of Commissioners, sitting as the Board of Equalization, is in session. Are there any, all three commissioners are present. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
No changes to the agenda, okay. First item on our agenda is the tax exemption appeals from LADA Community Action Agency. Someone here from LADA to talk about that?
Good morning.
You can sit down or take the podium, either one, just doesn't matter.
We'll sit down. I brought our financial director with me today.
Okay.
My name's Katrina Vincent. I met you last
Yes,
time.
sure.
And I brought Karen Ryan. She's our newly hired financial director, so she might be able to answer some additional questions.
Oh, okay.
Just make sure the microphone's up close to you, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can hear you. Okay. All right, so go ahead.
We sent over the preliminary audit, and then I also sent over just a statement from our board president. And Karen had done a little additional research. We are both new to the organization. We're both under 90 days. So we've just been putting some things in place to try to streamline our financial department. I did ask some other individuals that have been with our organization for longer to be here in case you had any questions for them. Did you have an opportunity to look at the audit and the statement? I also turned in a GL list of expenses on that property. I emailed those over.
Okay. All right, we didn't get your 2022 returns, however, or your statements, your financial statements for 22.
We don't have those yet.
All right. Okay. All right, does the board have any questions?
Why don't you just kind of restate the issue? We've had a previous hearing about this, but just to clarify, we're talking about largely your parcels with, I guess we're calling those low-income housing.
Correct. There are 6 units there that we have, the tenants in it are charged very low rent amounts from $350 to $550. They are disabled veterans, very low-income individuals. They would be unhoused if we didn't have them in those apartments. We did some Karen did some rent comparisons, and it would be really difficult for them to afford to live anywhere else in Boise right now. They've lived there, they're all long-term tenants. Every penny counts with what we do. When I was here last time, we discussed that 98% of our funding comes from federal and state grants. However, 28th Street is not, it doesn't profit, it doesn't make money, it supports itself. We use the money to do repairs, but we don't profit off of it at all, but it is separate. Our grants, our federal and state monies do not contribute to 28th Street at all.
So, we're really, we don't doubt the charitable aspects of the housing. We're dealing with state code here and Supreme Court decisions, and I think we sort of tentatively agreed if the housing was a separate entity under a different charity, it would qualify. The trouble we're having is with all the funding from the federal government. So when the Supreme Court laid out its 8 factors in what a board needs to consider, whether or not it gets all or most of its money from another government entity is one of the factors. So that is probably the main factor that cuts against your organization, but that is one of 8 factors that we can consider. And so that's what I think the board is dealing with right now is, does one factor outweigh the others?
Sure. I think that it goes hand in hand with what we do. I think every penny counts. So it's really important for us to get this exemption. We would have to increase rents on those individuals, and I think that would be very, very difficult for them.
Okay, any other questions from the,
As an example of rents, the tenant pays as low as $161 a month, up to the maximum of $475 a month. Of those 6 units, 3 are subsidized by the Ada County Housing Authority. So the rents are $350, $300, $550, but they're only paying, like I said, the $234, $161, $329. I looked at rents in the area, and you can't get a studio apartment for less than $700 a month, if it's even available. I looked at the Idaho statutes, and statute 63602C clearly states that if the property is derived, has income derived, where in the case of a charitable organization is not directly related to the charitable purposes of the organization, then it should be taxable. Hence, we are clearly related to the charitable purposes of the organization. Our tenants are elderly, people on welfare, veterans, low income, and people on Medicaid that have nurses live in with them. There is no way these people can afford any other property in the Boise area or most of Idaho without these units and without, paying these kinds of rents. If we have to pay tax on it, then as she said, we would definitely have to increase those rents, and we would probably lose some of them. They wouldn't have anywhere to live, and then they would be living on, whether on the street or in,
Assisted living, some of them would probably have to be in assisted living.
and using federal funds for those, or state funds, I'm sorry, for those purposes.
I think the real consideration is whether the organization as a whole is charitable. I think we probably agree that the housing is charitable. And so for the rest of the organization, I think we have to look at, the question is, if you're getting all your money from the federal government, just dispersing that money, does that fall under the umbrella of charitable? If you take the organization as a whole. So maybe you could address that.
Well, the organization as a whole, even though we are funded by state and federal monies, we provide direct services. So we have a veterans program with social workers, and I want to say at any given time they have 30 to 50 clients that they're working with. We have food banks. We run on a really tight budget. We maximize really well on what we have. And so the housing is part of our mission. We want to grow in that area and be able to provide more affordable housing for people. But as a whole, everything we do is charitable. Our grants don't cover any extra, things besides just serving clients and paying our staff.
Right, we have the food bank that we, help clients with food, we help with utility bills, we help with repairs and maintenance. Our entire existence is to help people of, lower income, whether there be veterans or
well, I don't think
clients.
anyone's suggesting that you don't have that you don't provide a service, but the question is it a charitable service because you're getting reimbursed from state and federal funds is the point. But you brought up a question, or to me anyway, I didn't realize till just now that your clients that rent these places, they're getting Section 8 vouchers.
Yes,
Well, aren't those Section 8 vouchers, they're subject to collecting market rents, aren't they? I mean, if you were to raise the rents, would not Section 8 vouchers pay the income?
The difference.
The difference, because the vouchers for the clients, they are a percentage of their income. That's what they have to pay that, but the balance
Not-
of it comes from the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority, correct?
Sure, yes,
That
but
was,
not
that
all
was my
of
question
the-
as well.
Right, and that is a good point, but I think that we only receive vouchers for 2, maybe of the 6 renters. Not everyone there qualifies for Section 8 vouchers.
How many tenants do you have again?
6,
Why wouldn't they qualify if they even applied?
I'm not sure.
Well, historically, with the vouchers, the Section 8 is paying less, and the tenant has been asked to pay more year after year after year. So the Section 8 subsidy is lower and lower and lower. And yes, they might pay a small portion of any rent increase, but they're not going to pay, it's still going to be on the tenant to pay those increases.
They have to pay 30% of their income, and that's what they have to pay. It has nothing to do with the value of the rent. They have to pay 30% of their income for rent and utilities under Section 8. I believe.
That's my understanding as well. I guess, Mr. Chairman, I guess my point here as well is, when are you going to have the 2022 information?
Haven't even started.
They haven't started. The preliminary audit that I provided you was for 2021, and I hope to have the final by the end of July, and then they will start on the 2022.
I guess my feeling is that you both are new, correct? And so you're trying to get some of this information together. And our difficulty is, back to what's been stated here, is the Supreme Court and the law is pretty clear about our parameters on how we have to make this decision. And we, based on what you just said, don't have all of that information at this point in time. So how soon will you be able to have that, did you say?
The 2022, I would expect, by the end of August, hopefully, and that's,
And then the clarification as far as the separation, which is an important part as well,
the separation of the Section 8.
correct? And the Section 8 questions,
We could have that in the next few weeks.
and the question as far as people who may or may not have applied for the Section 8, you said 6 of the 8 or 5 of the 8 or something are participating in Section 8 and the others aren't, and you don't know whether they're eligible at this point?
I think if we had 30 days to work with them, we can call them, we can go up there and speak with them and get a status on that if any of them have applied. It would just take time to do that. So I would think that we could do that within 30 days. Since Karen and I are both so new to the organization, and we are really trying to put some things in place to improve LA to make it sustainable. Can you speak to us about why we've gotten the exemption every year in the past, and this year? Is there something that we're not presenting to you that we needed to, that in the past they've been able to? Because we've scoured through every bit of documentation that we can, but the reality is the CEO and the CFO no longer work there, so we're kind of starting from scratch on a lot of things. We just don't know. I'm just wondering if there's a direction we need to go that we're not finding in our historical data, because we have had the exemption for several years.
Yes, our records indicate you've had the exemption since 2000 on these properties. And of course, we can't speak to what other boards have done the information. We only get a full application every 10 years, and that's when this is, and that's why it comes to our attention. So we can't speak to what other boards have done. However, I do think there's more information that we need, because particularly if, and I just heard right now, just from you, that the people that are renting from you are utilizing Section 8. That means it doesn't matter what the rent you charge, because Section 8 pays everything except for a 30% of the individuals, and that could be a very small amount, if they're just on some sort of other programs, they could have a small income, and then that's what the rent would be, and then Section 8 picks up the difference. That's what the voucher does, and so the owner of the property, that would be you, would be compensated for whatever the rent you charge. And the tenant wouldn't change, because they pay 30% of their income. They have to pay that, and you get a separate check from Boise City, Ada County Housing Authority. You don't know how many of those are on Section 8?
Not for sure, and
Well, there's 3 right now that are being subsidized.
That are on Section 8?
Whatever the Ada County Housing Authority is, if that is, 100% Section 8, then that is, all I know is that's the Housing Authority.
Is that something, Mr. Chair, you'd like them to look into over the next month or so, what the status of the tenants are and who's applied for what, and maybe if the remaining tenants would be eligible to apply? Is that information you would like?
Well, I think that'd be helpful information, because you can charge a higher amount if you need to, and it wouldn't increase what the tenants pay at all if they're on Section 8.
if they are, is the
Yeah.
challenge. It's not quite as easy as that from A to B to get them on Section 8, and then them having the capacity to do that, and us being just really taxed for time. We all do 10 different jobs, and so we can work on it, though. If that's the direction you feel that we should go, then we can work on that. But getting them all to Section 8 might not be, I don't know that that's just going to be a given.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It seems to me that there are other questions, other information is important for us. So it may be that we could grant them this exemption with the understanding that all that information would be available, and then we would consider it next year in terms of, with the expectation, clear expectation that if that isn't provided, that we would, under the criteria we would have to remove the exemption.
That would be completely agreeable. That would give us the time we would follow your recommendations, see how many of those individuals we could help guide to Section 8 or some sort of housing program, but that would give us the time that we would need to do that additional research and have all of our financials caught up and all of our audits complete.
All right. Well, do we have a motion then? Any further questions? Because I think that'd be reasonable expectation.
I was just going to say that we have open positions on our board, and we love to have commissioners on our board, so I wanted to just plant that seed. If you'd ever like to be on our board, we would really welcome that.
Well, if you want to send us an email with some information, we can take a look at that. And would
Okay.
you allow the commissioners to send a delegate, or would it just have to be the
We
commissioner?
would love that.
So yeah, you can send us information. We get requests like this.
Okay.
But yeah, I think this could give you time to just do some more research and work with Boise City, Ada County Housing Authority to have some more certainty for the people who are living there. I know that, I'm sure it takes a while to qualify for
Yes.
Section 8. I would assume they probably all would have qualified for the emergency rental assistance, which I don't know if they applied for that or not, or you guys probably could have applied on their behalf. I don't know. But that fund is starting to run out. That's the federal emergency COVID money.
Right.
But,
No,
I think there are
this
some other
was great.
opportunities.
I think this was excellent feedback for us, and we'll make it a priority to see if there are other options.
Okay, well then let's get a motion.
Mr. Chairman, then with that proviso that they've committed to provide that information and with the commitment that we then, as a board, would have that same responsibility, I would move that we approve the appeal and grant the 100% exemption for Elada Incorporated on parcel number R6876250430, R6876250435, R6876250440, and S1022325777, based on the evidence submitted and the testimony provided with the commitments on both sides, and authorize the chair to sign the documents on behalf of the board.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And before you go, I noticed that we had some painters in the back entrance, or the back exit, so you may want to exit out this one up here, up at the front. That's for everybody too. If you want to get to the parking lot, you just take a right.
Oh, that's not for general exit.
General exit.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda is the Dairy Gold Incorporated. It's a new business item. And we don't need to take any more information, so I would accept a motion on that.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll move that the Board of Equalization approve the following tax credit pursuant to Idaho Code, Section 63-602NN, the business tax exemption. Dairy Gold Incorporated, 80% of the eligible tax credit on parcels 0100900221A. That may be a letter O in the beginning, not a zero. O10090021A and P1DARIGLD02 as provided in the contract which was entered into on October 26, 2021, and authorize the chair to sign the documents on behalf of the board.
I second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, and now we have the qualified investment exemptions. We'll need a motion on that one as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Equalization approve the following qualified investments exemptions pursuant to Idaho Code Section 63-3029B, as recommended and approved by the assessor. Dairy Gold Incorporated, $115,362 exemption on parcel PDDARIGLD02, and Photo Electronics Incorporated for $6,699,497 exemption on parcel P1PH02RON02, and authorize the chair to sign the documents on behalf of the board.
I'll second that.
And as a point in terms of this is a procedural thing that we're doing in relation to the tax legislature and the tax commission.
Yes, it's a procedural thing that the code is not 100% clear on. All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, now, next up, we have the First Presbyterian Church. Good morning. Okay, you were granted an 82% exemption based upon 18% of the properties being leased to YMCA for daycare. 2011, the Board of Tax Appeals affirmed the 82% exemption. Is that correct?
That's correct on the information and evidence present at that time.
Church received 100% exemption due to clerical error in 2016 through 22. The church argues it should still receive the 100% exemption based upon 2012 lease agreements. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Beck and Commissioners Daly and Davidson. We appreciate, of course, the time and opportunity to appear to you before you today. I think just preliminarily, I would like to say page 3 of our supplemental memorandum has got a typo in a couple of places where we mistakenly refer to statute 63-802B and C, which actually is a typo or mistake. It should refer to 602B and C. That's in the supplemental memorandum at page 3. So if you thought I was pulling out of the air some other statute, that is not my intention.
Oh, okay.
There's an 8 instead of a 6 in a couple of places, so that's
All right.
corrected.
All right.
So with that, I also would just offer that my name is John Goodell. I've been a lawyer in Idaho for over 40 years, in Pocatello for more than 30, and in Boise for more than 10. And I'm happy to appear here on behalf of First Presbyterian Church of Boise. Also with me is Kathy Bilderbeck, young lady sitting behind me who is the business manager, and also Scott Muir, who is the church treasurer. So if you have other questions that you would like to offer or address them, they'd be happy to attempt to respond. I asked them if they would be interested in testifying at this hearing, and they declined. So I'm not sure why exactly, but
Well, that's why they're paying you, right?
it falls to me. And as a point of clarification, I'm doing this on a pro bono basis. They're not paying me. And it's because I am a member of the church, and I do feel passionately about the issue. So Pastor Kukla is not here because he's on a well-deserved vacation. It's a tough job that about 20 different things a pastor or other religious leader of a church has to do. And so he's got 3 weeks off with his family to recharge his batteries and get ready for the next year. So he submitted a letter. We send his regards. And Mr. Duro, who is an officer at the YMCA, has supplied a letter and also send their regards. I appreciate Chairman Beck bringing up the 2011 decision, and I would respectfully submit to you the facts and the evidence that we are submitting today is different than what was decided in 2011. And so that decision of the Idaho Board of Tax Appeals should not be given undue emphasis or considered as controlling or persuasive evidence. I think from that decision, it should be apparent that the primary basis for denying the exemption on the 82% versus 18% in 2011 was that the market rate lease as to what the YMCA paid FPC was found to be based on 3 comparables, similar to other downtown commercial and business leases. Today, I submit that that is not true. There was a lease in 2011 that was submitted, which is also not the document that governs the relationship between FPC and the Y. That is a new document that was formulated and entered originally in 2012, after the Board of Exemption, or the Board of Tax Appeals decision. And there are differences in that decision, but as a matter of the evidence and as a matter of the law which applies to that evidence, the contract that we're talking about is the shared use agreement, not what pre-existed, which was the basis for the 2011 decision. So that's a significant fact, a significant difference in the evidence, and that's what is controlling today, because it is a document that continues to govern the relationship. There have been two amendments, a First Amendment and a Second Amendment, and those changed some of the provisions, but essentially the 2012 shared use agreement governs in most respects. Now, one aspect it does not govern in is the janitorial and services and supplies, which were in the 2012 shared use agreement, are not in the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, which were entered in 2016 and 2018, and they're not. There has been no new written agreement made. So we're basically operating on the original shared use in 2012 agreement, plus the First Amendment as to the dollars involved in what the Y pays the church. And you can see from looking at those documents that it's quite a lot less money, I would submit, than any comparable business or commercial lease in downtown Boise today. It's in the range of about $6,800 as a monthly payment. And I have submitted two leases, one with my own law firms, the headquarters of which are in Pocatello. It's one of the larger firms in southeast Idaho, but we've had a satellite or branch firm office in Boise for over 30 years. And we were in the U.S. Bank building for many years. Then we were in the Park Center area for 3 years. Then we were in the C.W. Moore building downtown for 3 years. And that's a copy of the lease I submitted, which is $22, $22.50, and $23 over the 3-year term of that standard commercial use, which terminated in 22. And we've submitted another lease from the firm we're currently subleasing, which is Bill Mock's firm, Mock, Miller, and Hawkins, and they are in Park Center, and that's where we're subleasing from them, and their lease is in the same 20-plus range. And I've submitted substantial documents from TOK or TOC, the commercial retail property manager, and they do various other things, as I understand it, and from Colliers. And I would submit that these documents, the two leases referred to, the industry data for the first quarter and second of, I'm not sure it's second quarter, I have to look at it again, 2023, all indicate that commercial and business leases in downtown Boise are ranging in a 20 to 24 range ballpark. And so this compares to the church's payment received from YMCA of $6,800, which includes nothing for janitorial or services or supplies. So that is a significant difference. It's almost 2.5 or 3 times. If the church in round figures is getting payment of $7,000 a month, as against the downtown commercial and business leases that I've described and are in this literature from industry publications of over 20.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think we could probably concede your point that, I mean, the point is that the Y is getting a lower rate for charitable purposes. It's basically what you're saying. They're being subsidized for charitable reasons.
Well, in part, another point related to that is that during COVID, of course, the terrible time we all lived through, the daycare didn't operate. And if somebody had been on a commercial lease, the landlord would have expected them to pay regardless. The church did not expect and did not receive payment from the Y for the many months, 2.5 years of the pandemic.
Well, I can concede the point that it's a charitable relationship. To me, that's a given. The question then has to come down to, well, even if that's the case, does that still qualify for the exemption? I think that's the main issue we're looking at. I'm wondering if you could help me, if you could summarize some of the findings from the 2011 Board of Tax Appeals decision. What exactly did they find? And then talk about how the relationship has changed, that you feel that their decision no longer applies.
Well, I was attempting to do that in part by contrasting what is a commercial and a business lease, because that is language that's in the statute. What constitutes a lease, number one, which we don't think the shared use agreement is the same as a lease that was the subject of the 2011 decision, and that would be one thing. We don't consider it to be a lease. We consider it to be a shared use agreement where there's a certain reimbursement of a few line items of overhead expense. So most leases, and I submitted a definition of lease.
If you could just back up a little bit, what did the Board of Tax Appeals say about
Shared
leases and this?
What they found, because it was market level rent, which they consider rent being paid, that it was evidence that it was a commercial and business lease based on other comparables, which clearly is not the case today.
So
So
is the
that is
Board
a
of,
significant distinguishing fact as to why the rationale of the 2011 decision is different and doesn't apply to this case, and why the 2011 decision is not persuasive authority to be followed in this case.
so your position is that the Board of Tax Appeals is saying that if it's no longer a commercial lease, if it's more on the charitable end, that would still qualify under the religious exemption.
Well, I think that's right. And, the statute itself, 6380, or 602, there I go again with 8, 602B, subsection 2, refers to leases. So in the first step is, we don't think this is a lease at all. It's a shared use agreement. There's a certain reimbursement of certain overhead. Most leases, as the Institute on Appraisal, the industry Bible, says that I supplied to you in the supplemental materials, a lease is a written document in which the rights to use and occupy land or structure are transferred by the owner to another for a specified period of time in return for a specified rent. That's not a description of the shared use agreement that exists between the church and the Y. Under a lease, as the definition says, the landlord transfers to the tenant exclusive use of certain property in consideration for payment of certain rent. There is no rent referred to at all in the shared use agreement. There is no description of exclusive possession and control, as is typical in leases, and particularly commercial and business leases. There is a portion of the building that is used part-time by the Y for the daycare, preschool, and after-school programs. And their programs run from, it's either 6 or 7 in the morning to 6 or 7 at 6 p.m. at night, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. At other times, in the evenings or during the weekends, the church is free to use that property, those rooms that's otherwise occupied at those other times. So this is a true shared use agreement. This is not comparable at all to a business or commercial lease where the tenant gets exclusive possession and right of control of the premises that are leased to them.
So I think that's probably something we didn't know or we wanted to find out in this hearing, whether or not the Y has exclusive use of the space or not. And you're
They-
saying that they don't.
They do not. The
Miss-
shared use agreement provides directly the opposite. And in fact, the Boy Scouts, for example, that are sponsored by the church, use the classrooms in those areas that, some of the areas that the preschool, if I may refer to all three programs as by that abbreviated term, use during their hours of 6 or 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the evening. So, that's a distinction that says, a lease it may not be a lease just because somebody uses part of the building and there's some money that changes hands as a part of that. It's not necessarily what the statute, I would argue, contemplates when it refers to a commercial and business lease.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
So you're saying that it's a shared use, correct?
Yes.
And I think that's where, in my opinion, where the original decision was made on the 82% is shared use. You get some exemption, but not a total exemption because it is shared use. You conceded that it is shared use. During the week, it's primarily used by the YMCA. You said from basically 12 hours a day is used by the YMCA, correct?
Well, that's correct, but that leaves the same amount of time at 12 hours a day that it's not used by them. And the weekends when it's not used by them. So actually, it's less than 50% of the time that it's used by the YMCA versus the right and ability reserved to the church to use it. So,
Well,
shared
reserved for the use of the church and used by the church are two different things.
well, as I said, Commissioner Daley, the Boy Scouts use those, some of those rooms at times. And there's other groups in the church. There's 12-step groups and various others that have the right and ability. But the key point I'm trying to make is that whether used or not used, if it's reserved and a right of use and a right of the church to use it, whether they do or not, doesn't matter. It's not an exclusive possession, an exclusive right of control, and as exists under any typical or standard commercial or business lease. That's not an accurate description, and I would qualify me saying that I agreed with you that it was shared without the qualifications I've explained, because I don't think it's even 50% of the part of the church that they're using when we look at the time in terms of a 24-hour day and 7 days a week. It's less than 50%.
In my reading of the 2011, and of course yours different, is that's the distinction that the Board of Tax Appeals made, is it was shared use and there's a percentage there, but not a total either way. I guess that's what I was getting to. It's not total either way. It is shared, and it's the percentage that we're talking about, not the whether it's exempt or not.
Well,
I guess that's.
let me address that, because I don't fully agree with that either. I think the 18% based on a 10,000 square foot quantification impliedly assumed or was adopted as a methodology by the 2011 decision. But what I was just trying to describe is that the 18%, which is the 10,000 square feet that the Y uses during its partial use, that even the 18% was only based on the 10,000 square feet. It didn't get into, how much of the time is used, how many days of the week is used. It just was a flat 10,000 square feet. So my point is, they didn't have exclusive or right to control 10,000 square feet, 24 hours a day like any, and exclude the church from it. And that isn't the facts as to what does or doesn't happen. So the 18%, if you're taken into the use, which I think is important in the statutes, what is actually used, the 18% is reduced substantially by what they do use and have a right to use, and what the church reserves and has the right to use slightly more than half the time. So it's really not 18%, which is the math, I think, derived from the 10,000 square feet only, without further consideration. So again, this is different evidence, different facts, different things before you. So what else was different? The 2011 decision talks about a full-service lease. I would submit this is not a full-service lease. And for the janitorial services and supplies are not included. Under the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and all times forward, janitorial is not included. So that reduced by around $2,500 a month the payment the church got back in 2011, which put it in more of a comparable market rate lease to other commercial and property leases at that time, but which are certainly not the case here. It's not a full-service lease, so that is a different distinction factually, and I think undisputed based on this record. Another I just think that when we get into this shared use on the basis we've described, is that what 63602B is intended to address? And if I may, I'd like to just turn to the statutory language a little bit. And I would say subsection 1 of this statute has caused a lot of trouble and consternation and litigation over the years and has been changed several times. It was changed in 72 from the 105, the prior statute. It was talked about a parsonage. It talked about worship services. And one case that is reported is interesting is whether church camp qualified, and the Supreme Court determined that it was. There's other decisions as to where a priest lived and to what extent that's a parsonage and is it connected with worship or not. To address these issues, the legislature amended the statute to change that language, and it's changed it a couple of times. And the current version of the statute talks about a religious entity, this is subsection 1, used exclusively for and in connection with any combination of religious, educational, or recreational purposes or activities of the church. I would say that language is broad enough to cover this shared partnership, if you will, where the church has the building and the Y has the programs and the staff, that this is used exclusively and in furtherance of the church's community-minded mission in this community for educational and recreational purposes under that statutory language, which is broad enough to cover it on its face. And the church is not just something that exists for Sunday worship for people to come and go and that's it. And First Presbyterian prides itself on being very community involved and oriented and having partners and doing lots of things that I think we would all agree are charitable or educational and recreational and sometimes religious, but not always. And one of its missions and one of its programs, as we've tried to emphasize as the church's mission in this community, and particularly downtown, is these partnerships. And I think that the shared use, considered in the light of this partnership to provide quality, affordable daycare to the downtown community, for the benefit of the children and their parents and their employers, so that the parents can work and the kids have a safe place to go. This is part of the mission of the church. And partnering with the YMCA to do this is well within that statutory language of subsection 1 I just read to you. So that's argument. I think that's the beginning and end of the decision. And I've submitted all kinds of stuff telling you what the mission of the church is, the letter from the pastor, why they do this, the letter from Mr. Duro at the why we do this, what the mission of the Y is, and it is still chartered as Young Men's Christian Association, although they refer to it as the Family Y. So, you know, the roots and the history and the charter are there as a Christian organization, as is obviously the First Presbyterian Church. But, so I think that definition is broad enough. There is education for daycare. There is recreation and occupying the children in the classrooms and on the playground and on the recreation facilities that exist in the yard. And when we talk about in connection with any combination, again, that's very broad language. So the church doing this with a Y on this basis fully carries out this, and it's covered by the statement. But I know that's not what bothers you the most, and wasn't the basis for the 2011 decision. And so that gets into the subsection 2 as to a lease for business or commercial purposes. And as I was trying to explain before, this is not a lease in any commercial or business purpose under any conventional standard for reasons we've already discussed, and I really don't need to repeat it. So, a lease, we don't think so. Is it? Isn't it? Look at the comparable leases of commercial downtown businesses you have. They're all drawn, and the ones I've submitted from my law firm and the other firm are, we have certain amount of square feet, and this is what we're charging you per square feet, and that's the amount of your annual payment, and if you want to pay it monthly, we divide it by 12, and that's what you pay. And that type of standard, conventional, commercial, and business lease, that's how they're done. That's how they're written. They don't bear any resemblance to this shared use and the reimbursement for limited items of overhead that are in the shared use agreement, which is what distinguishes the shared use agreement from being a commercial or business lease.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I guess just to, in my mind, to clarify, I guess, summarize what Mr. Goodell said as well as what we've discussed here. Basically, there's some ambiguity in the law. The legislature has changed the law, and just to clarify, as the gentleman has just said, the Board of Tax Appeals has clarified it somewhere, and there may be, depending on your opinion, some ambiguity in what the Board of Tax Appeals has said in 2011. But when it comes down to it, it's basically evaluating, because it is shared, there's a shared use agreement, it's the percentage of the share that YMCA has. I mean, we do deal with this with other churches who have daycare facilities, evaluating what the percentage is in terms of that share. We do that with other churches, like I said, in this same context, and we have done and do every year. So I guess it comes down to, in my mind, what percentage that is, the shared percentage in terms of the relationship, in my mind, and welcome the comments of the other commissioners here, but it's basically the percentage that we've determined as 82%. There's a question over whether that should be 82 or another percentage, but there is a shared use agreement. There is a shared use, so I don't think there's a question of whether it should be 100% or shared. It's the percentage. Really comes down to the percentage of the shared agreement, in my mind, at this point in time anyway.
Well,
Mr. Chair,
May I
Commissioners.
comment? in response to that, just briefly. I know I'm taking way more than 10 minutes, and I'm sorry about that, but we want to try to cover, in direct response to that, I would say you're looking under Section 2, assuming it's a lease and assuming it's a business or commercial purposes involved, which, for reasons already said, I disagree with. But you're also, I want to point out that the proviso is what I call it, the last sentence after it talks about the partial and whether it's 3%, over that you charge it and so forth. So assuming everything you say, it's a business lease, it's a commercial purpose, it's, disagreeing with me, which, respectfully, that's what I do. So, but it's provided the use or lease of property, by a church, if I may paraphrase, for athletic or recreation facilities, residence halls or dormitories, meeting rooms or halls, auditoriums or club rooms, for and in connection with a purpose for which the church, again paraphrasing, shall not be deemed a business or commercial purpose, even though fees or charges are imposed and revenue derived. Meeting rooms, what are classrooms? But meeting rooms, where teachers and staff meet to plan, programs and what we're going to do during the day with these kids. That proviso is a further exception to the lease exception of subsection 2. So under those circumstances, I would respectfully submit meeting rooms are classrooms. It's for daycare, there's recreation, there's education there. It's for the purposes of what the church does and for its partnership, what the Y does. So that is yet another reason that there should be a full exemption. And that was not addressed or considered, I don't believe, in the 2011 Board of Tax Appeal decision, and is a separate ground standing alone, which we assert at this point in time.
I think you want
Yeah,
to do it.
go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I just wanted to point out there's been some discussion that the law may have changed. Idaho Code 63-602 Cap B was last amended in 2008. So the same statute that was at issue in 2011, that was in place. And it's the same statute now that's in place right now.
Well, I agree.
Their
and
decision was made on the 2008, which is after that.
Yes.
I agree that subsection 1 was the same there, and I didn't mean to suggest anything different. I was talking in terms of some historical context over the various reasons, historically in '07, which I think I mentioned, and
You changed from it.
8.
It was apparently a lease agreement under the Board of Tax Appeals decision in 2011. Is that not correct?
It was determined to be a lease.
It was determined to be a lease because it was a shared, the same kind of thing you're talking about.
As near as I can tell, it's the same square footage that's being used and the same uses that are contemplated.
Yeah, well, and that's what it,
Yeah, and
I have your shared use agreement here, but I only have the one that concluded in August of 2019, where where the YMCA is paying a total of $7,336, and in a previous agreement, you have the shared electric, that they're paying 50% electrical power for the whole building.
no,
Am I reading something wrong here? It says 50% electrical power. First Church, the entire building shall be allocated to YMCA using these percentages: 50% for electrical power, 80% for water, 33% for geothermal, 80% for sewer, 50% for trash, and 20% for natural gas.
those are adjustments to what the existing lease term provided. They weren't paying that for the whole building in any respect. I have got a handout which summarizes the 2012 agreement as including a holdover provision.
Well, how much are they paying right now? Because
They are paying something,
they're
correct?
paying right now, what I have in front of me is they're paying $7,336, but that agreement ended in August of 2019. So how much are they paying right now?
If you're looking at the Second Amendment, the last sentence says that in future years, under the First Amendment is what will be paid. It refers you back to the earlier one. And so under the First Amendment, what is stated in that is the one, it's exhibit, it's $6,836 is the total monthly payment. And then the utility costs for the entire building shall be allocated to the Y using these percentages. And so then there's,
Well, and it seems to me that the Board of Tax Appeals determined that this was a lease. That's what they called it, apparently. Am I right there? It was, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but they determined it was a lease, correct?
Correct.
but that's not the lease that is operative now. It's a different document, it's a different contract.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay?
if I might make a suggestion.
ahead.
It seems to me that we've spent quite a bit of time here, and the Board of Tax Appeals does in fact take a lot more time, a lot more effort to look exactly at some of the details you're talking about. It seems to me that a best thing for us to do would be maintain our position, have them go to the Board of Tax Appeals, and if in fact the Board of Tax Appeals has a different opinion now than they had in 2011, they'll have a full opportunity to present their case. We don't have time or ability to analyze it in the same way that the Board of Tax Appeals did. So I think at this point in time, based on, like I said, the legislature may or may not change the law. Board of Tax Appeals may or may not have differing opinions based on more detailed opinions. And it comes down to the shared percentage. All of those details, it seems to me that the Board of Tax Appeals has a much better authority to deal with that than we do at this point in time. So that's where I would, unless there's further discussion by us here, I would make,
I'm gonna respectfully disagree. So I'll tell you where I'm coming at this from. I think there's a lot of discretion in this board. I mean, we can interpret the statutes strictly, or we can construe them liberally. I think that's our charge. And so when I look at the mission of the church and the YMCA and charitable organizations, that's in the community interest. I mean, it's something we want to promote. So I think that dictates more of a liberal approach to the statutory interpretation. I think what you guys are doing is good. It's in the community interest. And so I think that I interpret it more in a liberal discretionary manner, where I would look at, I think you have presented enough evidence, at least to my satisfaction, to go, I could lean towards giving the full exemption. I think maybe the main point for me is the discussion on exclusive use of the property by the YMCA. And you've presented evidence that it's not an exclusive use, it's a shared agreement, and you're saying that the lease you had in 2011 has been modified, so that's not really a lease, it's more of a shared use agreement. You're saying there's substantial differences between the lease that the Board of Tax Appeals looked at versus the one that we're looking at now. We recently had a case with another church that we originally denied their exemption, but then reversed. It was where a church was renting space on their soccer fields to a soccer league. And originally we denied it because of the commercial aspect. When we heard more information, one of the things we heard was that the soccer team didn't have sole and exclusive use over the fields. The fields were used for other different things as well that the church was doing as part of their mission. In that discussion, we kind of, well, at least I brought up a differentiation between that kind of agreement and let's say the church was leasing space to like a Starbucks or a coffee thing, or some commercial enterprise within the church that had full and exclusive use of the property. And so that was kind of the differentiation we used between those two. And there's an element of that, I think a large element in your case, although I think the YMCA is using a lot more time than probably the soccer field did. But it's not 100% exclusive use. The church is still using it. You also mentioned that it's part of your religious mission to have this agreement with the YMCA. One thing that we try to look for is if it's in the Articles of Incorporation, what the religious mission of the church is, and if it specifically mentions these types of things that we generally grant it. When they don't, we have to have a lot more consideration. And I think you've made the case that this is part of the church's religious mission to have the daycare with the YMCA, which those factors, exclusive use, religious mission, to me, in a liberal interpretation of this, leans towards granting the full exemption. And so that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Well, go ahead, Chairman.
Well, I'm wondering if you're looking at granting a full religious exemption or granting a full charitable exemption.
I think this would fall under the religious exemption if it is part of the church's mission to have that space as a daycare, as well as it's not the exclusive use. Because again, the entire property would be exempt if it all falls under the church's religious mission. It's my understanding.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, would you please refer to Exhibit 3? I believe that's where the mission statement is, and that way you can refer to it to see if the use of the daycare fits within its mission statement.
Exhibit 3.
Yes.
Well, let's see if we can find it. A lot of exhibits here.
Just while you're looking for that, I guess I would agree with Commissioner Davidson in terms of the charitable use of religious, but it goes back to what I said before. It's shared use. It's not 100%. It is a shared use. It's a matter of deciding what that percentage is, not. So 100%, I don't think even the church concedes that it's 100%. It's a shared use. So I don't think granting it 100% would be right.
I'm just trying to remember on the soccer field issue, I think we did change that back to 100%, recognizing that it was, I think the differentiation is shared use versus exclusive use. So if it was exclusive use, we would have minus their portion out of the exemption, but when we determined it was more of a shared use, then we gave the 100% because the church is still using that property for church activities apart from the soccer fields.
But they were using it at the same time. I mean, they have it at least conceded 12 hours of the day that the church can't use it for their purposes. That's the difference. The other one was the soccer users, they were going in and out during the same time they were having those. That's the way I remember it. Maybe
I think the
was
soccer had a set schedule, but it was probably less than what the daycare is using. So if this is hinging on, it's in the board's discretion to, if the space is being used 80% of the time versus 40% of the time, I still think it's discretionary for the board to say, okay, that space is being used part-time, but not exclusively, but a certain amount of hours would trigger an exemption versus not.
What does it say that? Because I haven't read that. What is the mission statement?
That's one of many documents explaining the church's mission, which isn't limited to that particular page in the exhibit submitted, respectfully.
Well, it goes back to what we're talking about, the shared use and the mission statement. I guess that's why it's relevant in my opinion.
we can keep debating, or we can, somebody make a motion.
Well, I've already made my, I think, so I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move that the Board of Commissioners sitting on the Board of Equalization uphold the 82% exemption for the First Presbyterian Church, parcel number R1013005667. Again, based on the fact that there is, as we've had 45 minutes of discussion, this would allow the Board of Tax Appeals to go back, review this again. They've done it in 2011, but now it's been 12 years. So this would give them that opportunity, and even the legislature, if they decide that they want to, if there's some ambiguity there that needs to be clarified, give them that opportunity to clarify that as well. So I so move, as I just stated.
All right, is there a second to the motion?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll make a substitute motion to grant 100% exemption. And I do get the Board of Tax Appeals, could be the final arbiter of this. I just think more comfortable sending a large corporation like Albertson's headquarters to the Board of Tax Appeals rather than a church, which there will be a lot of expense in adjudicating that. And so because of that, I lean more towards the just granting it at this point. So that would be my substitute motion.
Mr. Goodell just indicated that he was doing this all pro bono, so.
Yeah,
There's still the time cost, obviously.
yeah, well,
I'm not sure if I'm allowed a further comment. It's a discussion amongst the three of you only.
oh,
May I add one point?
okay, go ahead.
The 2011 decision of the board declined to consider whether the church also qualified as a charitable organization under Idaho Code Section 63-602C, finding it was untimely raised. And we have raised that argument here, and I think Commissioner Beck alluded to it in an earlier statement about a charitable aspect of the church. But the key language there provides that if church leases property for which, or uses such property for business purposes from which revenue is derived, it's not directly related to the charitable purposes for which it's founded. The revenue derived by First Presbyterian Church is directly related to its mission that is received from the monthly payment of the Y, and the church also qualifies as a charitable institution under that alternative statute, an argument not considered previously by the Board of Tax Appeals.
Precisely, I appreciate your comments, and precisely why I agree the Board of Tax Appeals, it's legitimate for them to consider it again.
Okay, well, I don't hear a second to your motion. Is there a second to your motion? I'll second your motion. Restate the motion.
I move that the Board of Commissioners, sitting as the Board of Equalization, uphold the 82% exemption for First Presbyterian Church, parcel number R1013005667.
And,
And authorize the chair to sign the documents on behalf of the board.
okay. All right, I'll second that motion. Now, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners and Chairman.
All right, we next have Gemstone. Thank you. Yes, yes. And Gemstone, I guess there's no one here for Gemstone, right? What's that?
Yeah, no one's here. We were expecting someone, but no one's present.
No one's here for the Gemstone thing. Well, where is the, we don't have any document.
Harry Riley, Community Health.
That's Gemstone? Oh, okay.
They lease from Gemstone.
Oh, that lease from, okay, that's it, all right. That's right, they're asking for,
Terry Riley, you're right.
okay, well, that explains it. Terry Riley's not gemstone,
Right.
but they are in this case, right? And, they're asking for us to reconsider. And, I think that because Terry Riley doesn't own the property, that's not eligible for an exemption. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, is there any further discussion on that or issue?
Just make sure, clarification again for the record, they are not qualified. Our analysis is they are not qualified based on the fact that they do not own the property, correct?
That's correct. The charitable exemption requires ownership of the property by the charitable organization, and Terry Riley does not own the property. They're leasing it.
Thank you.
Now, if they were an educational organization, they would qualify because there is an exception in the law if it's an educational organization. correct?
Educational exemption does not require ownership.
Ownership.
Only use.
That's right. All right, do we have a motion then?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the Board of Commissioners, sitting as the Board of Equalization, uphold the denial of tax exemption for Gemstone Inc. on parcel R 30738000030.
I second the motion.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we have 26-8. And they have nobody here appearing. And all right. It seems as though they want us to reconsider our first denial because they bought the property. It's a bare piece of land, correct?
Yes, Your Honor, in their application, they indicated that they bought this piece of property in October of 2022, and it is an empty lot that, in their application, they indicated would be used for future church services. So it was denied on the grounds that it was not in use for religious purposes on January 1 of 2023. In their appeal, they've indicated that it is actually in use for weekly prayer service.
Held monthly.
In their appeal, it's indicated that it's used weekly. When we asked for additional information regarding the use, they then said it's a monthly prayer service. So they provided differing information, but it's at least once per month is, according to their information, that it's used for prayer service. They've indicated no other use of the property, that it is exclusively used for their church purposes.
All right, is there any more discussion on it from the board?
So your analysis is that it qualifies for an exemption if the board determines that this is enough of a use.
Correct.
And there's no information that shows that it's used for any other purpose than what they've described in their application.
In their appeal, they attached their January 2023 newsletter and referred the board to that for additional information on the use. However, when I read the newsletter, it also indicates that it will be used for future purposes. It appears that they plan to use it for youth programs, but the newsletter also indicates it would be for future use. But that's all they've provided.
But I guess my question is, they're not allowing any other use than church use, even if it's only like weekly, monthly, or whatever.
Based on the information they've provided, I'm not aware of any other uses other than what the church says it's using it for.
Thank you.
All right,
Were they presented with the ability to appear and they decided not to come? Is that the information our
Yeah,
clerk
they didn't
has?
request a hearing. Yeah, they said they didn't. Orally.
Yes, on the appeal sheet, there's a question that asks, do you wish to present oral testimony before the Board of Equalization? And they marked no.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I guess this is a religious organization, and based on their statements that they've made, I would trust that it's not used for any other purpose except religious purposes.
Correct.
And that even if it's minimal, it's the only use.
That's
that
my
it's being
understanding.
used for religious purposes. So therefore, I would move that the appeal grant 100% exemption for 26-8 incorporated parcel number R15780000246 based on the evidence submitted, and authorize the chair to sign the documents on behalf of the board.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, you've heard the motion. Is there further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Okay, let's see. What do we have here? I think that does it for our today's activities. Oh, we do have another, should we do this afternoon on all these?
You're done till 1?
What's that?
Done until 1?
Yeah.
Unless we do the,
Yeah, no, we're done till 1. I think we probably need to, all these other ones are taken up at 1
other
o'clock.
things are scheduled at 1. So.
Scheduled at 1, so we'll take them up after Mr. Martin Betweiser.
All right, recess for now.
We are in recess. Yes. Noon. Today is the 10th day of July. The time is 1 o'clock. The Board of Commissioners, sitting as the Board of Equalization, is in session to conduct its assessment appeal hearings. All three commissioners are present. Before we get going, we have a recording.
You have a what?
Recording.
Oh.
Did you lose it?
Oh, just.
Well, I can read it if you can't find it. Well, let's wait until you get the recording.
Not muted. Well, might have to read it, I guess. No. That's the one.
Are you having difficulty finding it? I can read it if you can't find it.
Yeah, I think you better read it.
Yeah, I got it right here. All right. Purpose of this hearing is for the Board of Equalization to provide taxpayers with an opportunity to appeal the assessed value placed on their property for taxing purposes. For each hearing, the appellant will be given 3 minutes to make their presentation, after which the appraiser will give a factual presentation on how the assessed value was established. Each appellant will then have a chance to provide a final 2-minute rebuttal. The board will then make a decision. Anyone wishing to give testimony will have to be sworn in. All motions made during these hearings will be made by the Board of Commissioners convened as the Board of Equalization. Pursuant to Idaho Code Section 63-501A, only the property owner, taxpayer, or their legal counsel may appear before the Board of Equalization. You may, however, call witnesses to testify on your behalf within your allotted time frame. We are aware that some appellants may not be able to appear at their scheduled hearing due to our statutory time frame to hear appeals. However, the board does review and consider all documents and information provided when making our decisions. As set forth in Idaho Code 63-502, the burden of proof falls on the taxpayer seeking relief to establish that the determinations of the assessor is erroneous, including all determinations of the assessed value. Otherwise, this board shall uphold the assessed value. It is important to note that if there is a reduction in your taxable value, it does not reduce resources to the governing entities, but in fact shifts the tax burden to other taxpayers in the district. Any adjustments made on your assessment will be in place for the current tax year. Please understand, only after the current tax year, the adjustment will be removed and your property value could change drastically if market conditions warrant it. If you're not satisfied with the Board of Equalization's decisions, you will have an opportunity to appeal the decision to the Board of Tax Appeals or the District Court. Okay, now before we get started, every person that intends to give testimony has to be sworn in. So any person wanting to give testimony in this case, stand up and we'll swear you in.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Okay, good enough. Mr. Bettweiser, you have, time is yours.
Yeah, before we begin, I'd just like to object to the opening statement. I don't believe that the 3-minute timeline for presenting an appeal where the burden is placed on the appellant is fair, constitutionally fair for due process to allow to present an issue such as this magnitude in 3 minutes, and especially when the responding party is not given a
They have 3 minutes as well.
it's in any amount. So I move that we can extend that if necessary. There's at least 10 exhibits, and I just,
Well, we'll see. Just get started. Go ahead.
yeah, this property is, the appeal is kind of based on the trending value of the Freedom Lane Estates where my property is located at. You can see from Exhibit 5, Freedom Estates subdivision encompasses Yorktown, Valley Forge, and East Gloucester there. See from Exhibit 1, from the trending for that subdivision, or in that subdivision from my house, from year 2021 to 2022, there's an increase of 23%, valuation increase from 21 to 22. And then from 22 to 23 this year, for what we're here today, it decreased 16%. Now, there's an identical house in that same subdivision that had identical same floor plan, identical same square footage when it was built, that is on Valley Forge, and that's 3939 Valley Forge, and I have some exhibits concerning that house also. Through the years, both of our houses have gone through some changes. The house on Valley Forge went through a remodel in 2008, and I started remodeling mine in 2013, so there has been some changes. And as far as square footage goes and other changes to the property. You can look at Exhibit 1A, shows my house, the square footage of my house is what's being assessed at 1,710 square feet. Look at Exhibit 2, you can see that the trending for the subdivision is pretty much similar for the house on Valley Forge. The value increased from 2021 to 2022, 22%, and then decreased 16% for this year's valuation also. It just appears that there was a 1% difference increase in valuation in my house than there was in the Valley Forge house. Exhibit 3 shows the house on Valley Forge as it is now. It shows it as a split level, which is the same as my house as a split level. Exhibit 4 shows the square footage of the Valley Forge house at 1,552 square feet. And you can see that from the total square footage, the total square footage for the Valley Forge house is $231.83 a square foot, and my house, the square footage amounts to $254.85 a square foot. So there's a difference in the square footage the Valley Forge house, the square footage assessment is approximately $25 a square foot less than my house. Exhibit 5 again shows a subdivision where the two houses are located within the subdivision. And what's telling with the house on Valley Forge is the house sold, the house on Valley Forge sold in 2021 for $385,000 at that point. And so that should have been the market, that should have been the assessed price for that year, $385,000. If you calculate the 22% trending increase for that time period, it should have assessed the house at approximately $469,000 for that year. But Exhibit 6 is an exhibit from the assessor's office showing an increase of inflating it up to $527,000. Exhibit 7 shows an increase again, 24% increase for the same house that sold the previous year earlier, above the trending for the subdivision. Exhibit 8 shows certification by a certified appraiser here in Boise, showing that the actual square footage of my property is 1,611 square feet and not 1,710 square feet as the assessors have assessed the values at. So this is from Certified Real Estate Appraiser, Idaho Home Appraisal, Inc. Exhibit 9 shows some pictures that the appraiser took showing the incompleteness of the siding of the residence and still needed to be upgraded, become priority marketable. Exhibit 9A shows on the very right-hand side, it also still shows that the siding is not completed on the house as part of the remodel that was started in 2013. Exhibit 10 shows an estimate of just the labor, not the material, just the labor of what it would take in order to complete the siding on the outside of the house to make it up to grade, to make it marketable, A1 marketable. And the summary I included at the last of the page just kind of shows the discrepancies in how the appraisal was inflated in previous years of the residents and shows the assessment of what it, if you was to subtract the square footage of the square footage price minus less the square footage that the house actually is, it would be $25,230, and you subtract that from the current assessment value, which would bring it at $410,570. Now, that's not even taken into account that the lesser appealness that of the missing siding and for marketable reasons or whatever, and if you were to take another $15,000 off that, and if you were to calculate that at the square footage price of the house on Valley Forge, that would bring the total assessment, really an actual assessment of $358,478. And so just subtracting the square footage value of the house, I felt would be reasonable without even adding or subtracting, calculating in the other factors that maybe make the house less marketable and less appeal for appraisal purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. We gave you a lot more time.
I heard some beepings going on, so.
There was some beeping, but there's no one here waiting for you, so we decided to go ahead, and I decided to go ahead and just let you give your case. You don't have anything else then, right?
That was pretty much,
Okay.
just the nutshell
Thank
presentation.
you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Colton Elmore, residential appraiser with the Ada County Assessor's Office. The subject property is located in the Freedom Estate subdivision in southeast Boise near Bergeson Street and Law Avenue. The subject property is a split-level home built in 1980 with additions in 2014 and 2020. A detached garage was added in 2014. The home is of typical construction and is located on a typical lot size for the homes in the area. The subject was trended for the 2023 tax year and decreased 15.82%, which is consistent with the immediate neighborhood. The subject property has been appealed multiple times in the past due to the appellant's concerns over the recorded characteristics. However, the assessor's office has been refused to access the property in order to verify characteristics, despite multiple attempts to work with the appellant. In 2022, the subject property was brought before the Board of Tax Appeals, with the decision being to uphold the subject's 2022 assessed value. The first red tab is a letter provided by the appellant from the Idaho appraisal alluding to a recent inspection and square footage conclusion of 1,611 square feet. The assessor's office has adopted the ANSI standards, measuring standards, for uniform measuring guidelines in which we measure floors from the exterior and include this stair square footage in both the above stair and below stair level. We spoke to Mr. Darrow from Idaho Appraisal, who said he also measures from the exterior walls, but does not include the area under the stairs in lower level. We believe this may be the difference in our estimates. A sketch has not been provided. The green tab marks a timeline of assessment years for the subject's property going back to 2013. The blue tab marks aerial images of the subject property. These images indicate the construction of the additional square footage as well as the detached garage between the years 2013 and 2016. The yellow tab marks a contractor's estimate provided by the appellant in 2022, which describes the cost to install masonry to the areas of improvement currently without finished siding. An adjustment of $15,000 was applied in recognition of the condition issue. The assessor's office staff has recently observed that the exterior siding project has not been completed. Therefore, the adjustment of minus $15,000 has been carried on as part of the 2023 assessment. The second red tab marks a quote by the BTA's 2022 final decision, an order describing that there was an insufficient basis for the board to alter the respondent's conclusion of 1,710 square feet. On page 2 are the results of our mass appraisal defense for the subject's area. On page 3 in your materials, you will see 3 comparable sales that support the current assessed value. All comparables used are similar to the subject in age, physical characteristics, and bracket the subject in size. Adjustments were made for time and size. Comparable sales have an adjusted sale price range of $429,000 to $474,200, with the subject on the low end of the range at $435,800. Page 4, 5, and 6 are maps showing the subject's property's location in relation to the comparables, a land equity map, and an aerial depiction of the subject. Based on the provided market data, the subject property's 2023 assessment value of $435,800 appears to be well within acceptable range of market value. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions from the board? Before we go ahead, you have 2 minutes to rebut.
Yeah, first I'd like to object. The assessors had this packet for over a week, and I'm just now receiving it at the table, so I haven't had a chance to review it or to critique what's going over. It's just too short a time to do that. So it's hard to rebut or to verify what's in there is correct. It's true this property's been appealed several times. The difference between this year and previous years is the exhibits that were, the evidence that was presented for appeal purposes was not from a certified appraisal. And the evidence this time is supplied by certified appraisal, which by statute has to be incorporated. Where before, the evidence presented was only from the draftsman and the person that was at the draft of and then after construction verified that those were the footages that were, and by statute, they don't have to accept those as evidence, I guess. So as far as the square footage, this is the total square footage, including the stairs, what what the assessors now are contending is up for arms. This includes the stairs, this includes everything, and this number verifies what was presented in previous years on appeal purposes. So the dealing with the assessors has in previous years hasn't been credible. I believe the credibility of the certified appraiser can stand and with this board for an adjustment on the appeal, on the assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board to either the appellant or the commission or the assessor?
Sure, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Betwadge, you've had a long history of appeals. You've appealed several times, it looks like. And then, how many times have you been to the Board of Tax Appeals? Has it been twice?
I think 2 previous times, yes.
So you appealed 2021. You went all the way to the BTA. And what's the status of, do you still have, I know we're still getting documents for one case that seems to be at the Supreme Court level. How many cases do you still have going on right now?
Just this one. Oh, and
The one from last year,
one from 2 years ago.
from 2021 and 2022, those two?
Yeah.
And so it looks like you're at the Supreme Court level for one of them. Which one's that?
The one from 2 years ago.
Okay. And you're still pursuing 2022 as well?
No, I think that one's been decided.
And you're not appealing that one anymore?
I think it went to it hadn't been appealed further from the tax board, no.
Okay. So you're still working on your 2021 issue with the Supreme Court. It looks like the last document I saw today said you had a conditional order of dismissal and you're asking for a time extension. What's the conditional order of dismissal?
It's allowing additional time for response to proceedings.
Not your motion. What's in the Supreme Court's conditional order for dismissal?
Just, they wanted a response to their conditional order.
And what were they asking for? What kind of response?
To ask, to see if it should be dismissed or not on technical grounds, reasons, or whatever.
So you haven't had any real success yet with the appeals?
It's a process. I don't know what to say. It's a process. But I think this appeal won't affect any of the other issues or anything. This is basically just over the square footage.
Sure. No, I'm just wanting to kind of get your history because I understand I've been a pro se litigant myself. I've gone up to the Idaho Supreme Court. It takes forever. It takes a lot of time. It's an endless amount of paperwork. So I can kind of empathize with you on that. The issue that you took in 2021 that's still going on, did that involve the square footage as well?
I don't recall if it did or not.
I'm just wondering if there's like a general theme amongst all your appeals to the Board of Tax Appeals and the Supreme Court over the years. Was it all generally about square footage, or was there
No,
different issues each year?
there were other issues, and like I said before, the issue, the square footage was not evidenced by a certified appraiser. It was only evidenced by the drafter and the drafter that could verify that those were the dimensions that he drafted it, and those were the dimensions that the remodel was built under.
Okay. So just in general, you've obviously spent a lot of time working on appeals. is there just in general something you're trying to accomplish? Is like a consistent theme to what you're trying to accomplish, or is it just different each year? I mean, what's the overriding issue that?
It's different each year.
It's different each year.
Right. So this year, I mean, it's the square footage and the trending for the subdivision.
I mean, would you say there's a general principle to all the issues you're bringing up? I mean, I know because last time we brought the square footage up last time, and so our logical question is, well, why don't you let the assessor go and measure the interior of your house? And you didn't want to do that, and you don't have to let them do it. That's your right. But I guess I'm trying to figure out, is it?
Well, last year I couldn't attend the hearing and something came up and I was.
I guess I maybe think of the year before, because I remember you didn't
here.
come to the
Yeah, I
last
wasn't.
one.
So last year this board just upheld the square footage because I wasn't
Right.
able to attend.
I'm talking about the previous year, when we heard you. We had asked if you'd wanted to let the assessor come in and measure the inside of your home, and you declined that, correct?
Correct.
Which again is your right, and then I guess you tried to offer evidence to prove that the square footage was what you're saying, which is what you're doing now. You're providing the appraisal to prove that the square footage, well, that the assessor is wrong on the square footage.
It was my contention that the assessor's office was erroneously altering the characteristics and in order to improperly gain access to the property, knowing that the burden of proof is on the appellant. And I thought the assessor's office was a little unscrupulous in a lot of their tactics as far as trying to access the property and get on the property without any notification, or just raising the assessment price and not sending letters saying, hey, Martin, we think that your square footage is this, and we see these kinds of discrepancies in your house. Could we come over and take a look? They didn't do that type of thing. They weren't any specific on why they didn't try to be specific on why they were trying to inflate all of the characteristics and the circumstances of the house. And in the assessor's office, I don't believe has that kind of, didn't very credibly approach the situation. Because I had other evidence also that showed that this was what it was, but there always seems to be something that somebody wants to not accept. And now I bring to this board a certified appraiser saying, this is what I've been saying for 3 years. This is the square footage of the property. And,
So, okay, just, I don't want to get in too much about, so just a chain of events for them to want to look at your property. I'm assuming that they sent you out the notice like they sent out everybody else in Ada County, and then you said, well, I don't agree with this square footage or these characteristics, and then you filed a appeal to this board, and was it at that point then they reached out to you and said, well, just come let us measure? Which seems reasonable to me, but is that what happened?
I don't, 2 years ago or
Yeah.
last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I don't remember all the specifics from 2 years ago. I'd have to go back and look, but the general approach to me was not appropriate.
I kind of want to get to the bottom of that because, I don't want, the county to be acting inappropriately, but, so the assessor's office got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of properties that they have to send notices to, and it's not going to be the perfect process, but, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what they did that was kind of inexcusable, because they're going to send out hundreds of thousands of notices. It's a small percentage of people, which still amounts to about 1,000 individuals in Ada County. They're going to take exception with it. They're going to file paperwork, and the assessor's office, they have to scramble to contact the hundreds of people who have issues with the property and they got to resolve it as fast as we can because we have a statutory time frame to deal with all this. So again, I'm trying to figure out how it was inappropriate or unscrupulous for them to ask to measure the inside of the home.
I do remember writing them a letter asking them specifically how they arrived or why they arrived at these characteristics, and they just wrote back with a general evasive, letter of some sort or whatever. They weren't specific on how they arrived at anything or anything like that. We just want to inspect your property, and they didn't supply any specifics or anything like that. So I don't know if all of this testimony is relevant or going to be of detriment to the other appeal or whatever, but I believe that we can resolve this issue on the square footage today and recognize that, that square footage has value, and more square footage has more value and less square footage has less value of market value of properties. And
Well, I would agree with that, but then you would probably have to respond to the assessor's contention that they contacted your appraiser, and he said he's not counting, I think it's the square footage underneath the stairs, using the standards he uses, but Ada County Assessor's Office seems to include under the stairs for everybody as part of their assessments.
From one of my understanding, when the appraiser told me it included the stair situation, I don't, like I said, I don't know what they said or what he said. But even if it was under the stair, if there was any footage under the stairs, it would only be 10 or 15 square feet at the most.
Do you have a sketch of the property? Because most of your properties have sketches on it that you calculate the square footage.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a sketch, but one thing I'd like to address with this appraiser, Josh, did measure the property, and one thing that we'd really like to get is the measurements of the sketch, which doesn't seem like too much of an ask. And that would really, this has been going on, I'm no appeals for almost 20 years. I just looked it up. I think seven times I can see BTA that it's gone. And I know the last couple of years, especially for the 2021 that's at the Supreme Court or going to the Supreme Court, that's also a square footage issue. And the fact that he's had an appraiser out there, we're really excited about that because we'd like to get this resolved. But the one thing we're missing is the floor plan so that we can take a look at it and we can compare it to our ANSI standards. And that way we're applying it consistent throughout the neighborhood and throughout Ada County for that matter. So, and I did approach Mr. Bettweiser prior to this, and just to kind of sum up, in our dealings with him, I was just trying to have a rational conversation, and he basically said, "Get out of here, you're annoying me." So, these are the type of behavior that we've dealt with for the past couple of years. So our communication has been very limited with him, and unfortunately, it ends up just being a lot of paperwork going back and forth. But we would love, our office too, as much as I'm sure he would, to have this resolved. And all it would really take is to have that floor plan, which I'm sure he received from Josh, the appraiser.
Okay, well, I'm reading the decision here from the most recent decision dated April 27th of this year from the Board of, and you did bring up the square footage in that appeal. And of course, the Board of Tax Appeals didn't agree with you. And
as I said, they didn't have the certified appraisers' numbers at that time, and by statute, if they would have had those, they could have modified that.
well, anyway.
I would like to get you off the rolls. I would like, well, not off the rolls. I would like to resolve your issue.
You'd like-
I'd like to be off the rolls and just have the square footage correct.
Yeah, off the rolls too, yeah.
You concede their point that if they're using a standard that includes underneath the stairs, and they're doing that for everybody, then you'd probably have to pay that as well.
Excuse me, I didn't hear that.
If they have a standard, if their square foot standards that they use countywide includes areas under the stairs, would you concede that you would have to pay for that additional square footage?
I'm trying to think from our last appeals that they said that the stair issue was included, but nothing about under the stairs. So this is the kind of the first I'm hearing about an under the stairs issue.
Well, let's get the assessor's office. What is the standard that you use across the county for, I mean, is it under the stairs? Why don't you just elaborate on
So,
what you include in that?
okay, based on ANSI standards, is the standard we hold for the county, the stairs or the degree of finish of the area around the stairs. In addition, areas beneath the stairs are included in the finished square footage, regardless of the distance between the stairs and floor between, or for the degree or finish of that area.
Don't you just use the foundation for this measurement of the square footage? If there happens to be a stair in there,
That's exactly right. The foundation is used in the square footage calculation.
So that's going to count if it's
And that would include this under the stairs.
go ahead.
it's two separate levels.
Yeah.
We would count as if the stairs were totally up above. So it'd be a full finished top floor and a full finished bottom floor. So that's how we're counting the stairs.
Well, in the Board of Tax Appeals decision that I'm reading, that you included in your, you have the Board of Tax Appeals decision, do you not?
Not with me.
It's in the packet they handed
It's in
out.
the packet they handed to you. They talk about from 2015, there's 240 square foot bedroom was added. Is that correct? And that the building permit, again, in mid-15, added 240 square feet. Appellant calculated a total of 1,611 square feet, which, that's exactly what your appraiser come up with, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And argue the property record should be changed to match. We're getting all the square footage and the actual situation is what's the market value of this property, independent of square footage, correct?
Correct.
So what's the market value of this property?
It's what we have it assessed at, $435,800.
And that's down 15.82% from last year, correct?
Correct.
And that's the one you appealed last year, the 517,000, correct?
Yeah, I appealed last year from 517.
And this year, you're appealing, or you haven't appealed yet, but the assessed value changed 15.82%, reduced.
Right, from a.
Independent of square footage.
Yeah, but the square footage influences market conditions, as does the condition of the residents. These square footage prices that the assessors wants to bring shows houses that are in immaculate shape. It doesn't show any market values with siding missing, what the market value would be with the siding missing, or the less footage. So.
They did say they gave you the $15,000 for the siding, last year, but you're also giving it this year?
That can't be true, because the trending for the neighborhoods is 22%, and 16%, the name is the same as every other house in the neighborhood. So it can't say that I was given more if the trending numbers are the same as every other house in the neighborhood. And as I said, the $15,000 siding issue was only for the labor. It wasn't even include the materials that were needed to finish the job.
And are you asking for a different value per square foot than what they have? They have 254.85. Were you asking for a lower one?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
They're saying your house is $254 per square foot.
Yeah, 254.85, I believe.
And were you asking for a lower value per square foot? Or you're agreeing with that value per square foot?
I was just agreeing with the value of that square foot just to lower the square footage price. But like I said, the house on Valley Forge is only $231 dollars a square foot for the same conditioned house, for the split level, for the same floor plan, except that house is completely finished.
Maybe let's have the assessor, do you know why this Valley Forge house, which seems to be in better shape, is assessed at a lower square
I
foot?
don't think he's mentioning the detached garage that he has also, so.
And the assessor testified last year that the detached garage has no value in the market as far as the value of the house goes.
What's the standard for detached garages?
I can't say the exact number, but I'm not sure where or who said that, but yes, there would be additional value for a detached garage.
Well, there's always a value for additional,
Exactly.
yeah.
I mean, that sounds reasonable, doesn't it?
When he was questioned at the tax appeal last year, Brad Smith said it had no bearing, detached garage didn't have any bearing on increasing the value, that square, as far as the square footage or the value of the property. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know what to believe.
He also-
That's why we're here. Like I said, I just haven't had any credibility with the assessor. I mean, there's one.
Board of Tax Appeals, I was accused of not being at the BOE hearing, but he was the one that was not at the hearing last year. So as far as the detached shop not having value, I'm a car guy. I love shops, and there's lots of people in Southeast Boise that like their garages. To have a detached garage adds substantial value. So I'm not sure where he's getting this information that I said it has no contribution
Well,
value.
there's no question about that. Detached garage adds value. If for nothing else, just the cost of building the garage adds value to the property, so.
But why, okay, well, I see it adds value, but why does it increase the value per square foot? Why isn't it just the lower value per square foot, but there's more square feet?
Well, you're looking at the total square footage when you're calculating, $254 a square foot. That's the total. So that's going to include your land, your improvement, detached garage. That's going to include everything on that. So it would be higher per square foot if you're looking at a similar home that doesn't have a detached garage.
It increases the value per square foot overall, just doesn't,
Because he's looking at the total value that he's calculating that based on. So it's still the same. If you take 1,711 square foot divided by that total versus if you take that garage away, it's going to change the dollar per square foot. So it's going to make him a higher dollar per square foot than similar properties. So
Last year, he said the garage wasn't included in their valuation method that they used last year at the board, in front of the Board of Tax Appeals. I was there before the Board of Tax Appeals, and Mr.
So for
Smith.
valuation purposes, if you're comparing a like property without a detached garage, you would simply do a plus or a minus, would you not?
correct.
So if you compare a property two doors down that does not have a detached garage, you would compare the total square footage, and then you'd either add or subtract for the value of the garage.
That is correct.
Okay.
The trending as I've stated, the trending for the subdivision shows all the other houses that don't have detached garages have the trending ratio of 22% and 16%.
and what was yours trended?
Mine was trended also. I mean, they're all similar within a degree. Mine was a little bit higher. Mine was 23% in 2022, and the other ones were 22%. So there was 1% difference, but that's minimal, I know. But that could be a garage too, I guess. I don't know.
But at the end of the day, for this appeal, what it comes down to is you just want to be assessed fewer square feet based on the appraisal you received.
If we can arrive at that, whichever formula or scenario you want to use, I just thought that was the simplest, deducting the square foot, but if you want to use the condition of the property also, as not being as marketable as one that's completely finished, that one could be used. But I just thought the simplest method for calculation for this board would be just to calculate the square footage, yes. But the square footage is definitely I mean, a bigger house square footage would be definitely more attractive for marketing and sales, sales comparison reasons and everything else. And so I think that would be the simplest, yes. Did that answer or that?
No, I get what you're trying to do. I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to get there when they're saying that they use the square feet under the stairs. They're saying that your appraisal didn't include that. What do you know what the square footage is under the stairs that the appraisal did not include?
I didn't think the appraisal included, disallowed anything under the stairs. Like I said, the foundation measurements were used for the lower and the upper, and then the upper sections, the stairs were calculated in also as living space for the square footage, according to my understanding. So it's all 1,611 square feet. The house was, for 20 years, it was 1,242 square feet. And I added 240 square feet to the living room and the dining room, 121 square feet to the master bedroom. And that should bring the total square footage of the house, of the living area of the house, to 1,611 square feet. And that's what it's been for, I mean, like I said, the 1,242 square feet was that way for 25 years. And it's been before this board in 2006 for 1,242 square feet. And this board lowered the assessment 1 or 2 years from my tax appeals based on the characteristics, the inflated characteristics of the assessor's office. So it's not like it's been totally unfounded. There have been years that this board has actually lowered the value based on erroneous characteristics. Just as 2 years ago, they listed my property with air conditioning, but they never lowered any valuation when they knew that my house didn't have central air conditioning. Now they listed as not having air conditioning, but they hadn't decreased the value of the residence for not having air conditioning. I think this number meets halfway. I mean, for any arguments to say, well, maybe he's got this or got that. I think it's a reasonable number as a halfway point. Like I said, I didn't request any additional for conditions of the house or anything like that. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just as a new kid on the block and just listening, it seems the square footage is a question, your basic question here this year. That's been a question before. That issue's been addressed by the Board of Tax Appeals. It found on in your favor. And you indicated that the 2021 square footage count is also in question before the Supreme Court, so it's still a court issue. So I think that, based on that, I don't think we can change it based on, one, still pending, and third thing in terms of that is, they've assessed it at the low range for your neighborhood. It's reduced by almost 16% this year. You didn't let them in to look at the square footage, and you haven't even given them a schematic of the square footage. So based on all those facts, I don't think we have any basis for overturning the assessment that's been established by the assessor. That's my personal opinion.
This board has the drawings of previous years of the layout of the house. The Supreme Court, pending Supreme Court, wouldn't have bearing on this hearing because, like I said, the evidences are different because this hearing involves a certified appraisal where the previous hearings do not. So it's not even, it's a whole different issue. It wouldn't even affect any pending or any pending
But
litigation.
you indicated the court, that is one of the questions before the court. is
Sorry, I can't
You
hear you.
indicated that is one of the questions before the court.
Yeah, but
Square
the court-
footage.
The court has different evidence for the square footage than it does before this board here. Like I said, the evidence presented here is evidence that the statutes allow, as where the evidence submitted previously is arbitrary, can be arbitrarily argued one way or another.
The
And
statutes,
it can be a moot issue once, if it's
the
just-
statutes allow it, but it still justifiably needs to be verified. Because, as you well
It's
know,
verified, we have a certified Exhibit 8, we have a certified appraisal, it's verified. The statutes allow,
do you have the schematic that shows the square footage of your house when you purchased it?
I didn't hear that.
The square footage of your house when you purchased it, is that in the equation before the court or any other place?
This board has schematics from 2 previous years, and obviously you've reviewed the records from the previous years. I don't know why you wouldn't have the schematics from the previous years then also.
Mr. Chairman, I guess my opinion stays the same. I don't think any additional information from me personally, and you've been here, you two have been here longer than me, but based on the information that I've heard today, I think we could make a decision. He has the appeals right again still. If that information goes forward either to the Board of Tax Appeals and or to the court.
Yes, and we can make a decision. We've taken this almost an hour now. I'm ready. If you're ready, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Commissioners sitting in the Board of Equalization uphold the assessor's evaluation on parcel number R2928150028. Is that 88? 80.
80.
And authorize the chair to sign the documents on behalf of the board.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Brettwater.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what the motion, what was the decision?
We upheld the decision of the appraisal of the assessor.
Well, okay, thank you.
We now have some more business to take up. I will accept the motion on that. Valuation appeals, changes, no hearing. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Commissioners sitting in the Board of Equalization approve the changes on the parcels listed under withdrawn, changes upholding the valuations on the parcels listed under withdrawn, no changes, approve the changes on the parcels listed under changes, no hearing, uphold the valuations on the parcels listed under no changes, no hearing, and authorize the chair to sign the documents on behalf of the board.
I'll second that.
Brad, did we get those all right?
Did we list all of them?
Did we list all of them?
I wasn't looking, sorry, I'll assume you were right.
Just say yes.
All right, got a few extra. All right, well, you've heard the motion, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Do we have any other business to be brought before the Board of Equalization today? Hearing none, we are adjourned.